Lekker.
Okay,
Cool. Right. How's it, Pete? How are you?
good and you?
Lekker, thank you. Let's use the goodly terms. Okay, guys. So this is the start of our, or let's just say this is how we're going to get into it. Our first vid for this start of this brand new podcast on Comrades Marathon Day, nog al, 2023. It's half year. Yeah, we kind of half into it. It's the 11th. 11 is a good number. And so it's 1-1. And here we are. We one on one. Peter and I are going to do this thing, as we said in our intro. And we're going to have a quick intro to so people can see who the heck we are and where we come from and why we have the audacity and courage to sit here and do this, even though it's fuck scary. So here we are. Pete, I'm going to jump in and to say I met you in the flesh, really, when we got involved about, I think, 2 years ago or so with the organic humanity movement. I mean, our histories have crossed paths in so many ways, but we hadn't always seen each other yet. The human touch, which we'll mention as we go both, like respectively, did it at different times. So always been on a page in our various journeys and other places. But we now share that specific spot, synchronized in real time. And also geographically, we live in the same area as well, in the hills, the beautiful hills of 1,000 hills. And we just sort of on different sides of the valley. So, but yeah, it's lucky to meet like this. And so, yeah, organic human movement, we'll flesh that out, the details as we go. I think that's about enough, for now. Does that work with it? I've just found, I'll say a brief thing. My experience of you, I call you the oracle. I've always told you, the wisdom keeper. That's from Matrix. For those who haven't seen it and they haven't seen the Matrix, please watch the Matrix, or you can just watch what's going on in the world and you'll see the Matrix anyway. um, and so, in many ways, that is a good ground or a reference common, I suppose, that we acknowledge the Matrix and we see the world for what it is and don't just accept it. We want to change it. I speak for myself, but I know you're a change maker like me. Pain in their own asses and each other's and everybody else's, but at least we can share that journey. And yeah, you're just a beautiful soul that I call my sister, way more than blood sister. So thank you for being that person. And I've
Sure.
learned and am learning a hell of a lot from you. And thank you for mirroring back all my cools and my uncools and my gooders, and also calling me out, when necessary. And I always appreciate that. We're not just like funny, cute friends that watch rugby or netball or whatever the hell together. In fact, on the contrary, we always deep dive. And that's what this is about. It is our deep dive comes from the umbrella of radical self responsibility. And I think each of us have taken up that theme in our life and that focus with great intention. And by hook and by crook and falling and stumbling, here we are. And now we're going to just go a bit more public with it. Well, we're already public with it, but we're just going to make it more of a virtual public forum, I guess.
Sure.
I'm gonna kick right in. So, where did you come from, Pete? Where do you come from? Why the hell are you here? And where are you going to? In a nutshell.
Yeah. Okay. Um, so I grew up in a tiny town, Dundee, northern KwaZulu-Natal, and in a normal dysfunctional family is what I always say. you know. Um, and yeah, life was I was always on the fringes, always felt like I was on the outside looking in. I read a lot as a child as a way to avoid the normal dysfunction of my family. And I would say My first kind of wake up call was round about 16, sitting in an abandoned Catholic church just outside Dundee on history tour from school, with Sheila Henderson, who was the sort of town historian, explaining what had happened during the in the removals, you know, and during the Group Areas Act, when the Group Areas Act was first done, and certain areas were zoned for whites and others for other people. And we were sitting in that church, and she was explaining the destruction that had happened to the community, that had a completely self-reliant community that had happened there. And I sat in that church with tears pouring down my face, thinking, how could people do this to other people, you know? And that was like where it all really started. I remember my classmates being a bit like, why are you crying? You know? Left school to go and do, I was depressed as a teenager. I went to do speech and hearing therapy at Wits. It was a hell of a year. I tried to commit suicide at the end of that year. I didn't know why. And I proceeded to do a whole bunch of things and never finish any of them until I found myself at 27 working for Deloitte and Touche, on kind of heading towards becoming a chartered accountant. And suddenly, and that's when I did the human touch, and kind of woke up to, again, because I'd been, you know, drinking and using all sorts of other things, whatever I could find to kind of avoid my feelings and avoid this feeling that something was wrong and I didn't quite know what. I'd been in therapy. Nobody could figure out why I just wasn't able to cope with life, you know. And then I started to discover that actually I was quite a normal person. I was very unadjusted to this very sick society, you know. And I left Deloitte and Touche, and I've kind of been on my own journey ever since then, trying to figure out my life, you know. I worked a lot with Stephen and Kathleen, who ran the Human Touch at that time, for about 2 or 3 years, maybe longer, and then headed into mainstream again to try and tick all the boxes of the should be pictures of how you make yourself happy. You know, I got married and I had children and we bought a house, and it's you know, still searching, studying craniosacral therapy, studying Buddhism, which are all very important parts of my journey, and then realized that actually the should be pictures ticking was never going to make me happy either, and so I left Scott, and that was when my like absolutely wake up journey really started. I mean, at that point, I already knew that the pharmaceutical companies had their own agenda, and that mainstream media, I didn't realize the extent of it, but I knew mainstream media was not really what it seemed to be, or what it puts itself out to be. And yeah, because of the craniosacral therapy, I'd already been looking into what vaccinations do to children and people. I was already on my own journey of not going any, you know, once I had my kids, neither of them are vaccinated at all. And I was looking into natural ways of doing things. I never took my children to GPs. We looked after ourselves at home. Natural medicine sort of perspective. And then when I left Scott, and I met my friend Gary, and started to realize that it wasn't just the pharmaceutical and medical section. Then I started learning about banking and history and false flags and the kids had been at Waldorf. I'd already decided mainstream. I wasn't going to be putting my kids into mainstream schools to be indoctrinated. So they were at Waldorf, and through that, I'd started looking into anthroposophy, Steiner philosophy, and all of that. And then obviously studying Buddhism, and then looking into through Gary Rosicrucianism and all the stuff that he'd been studying all of his life. But I was red pilled hard when I met Gary. And that resulted in some journeys with entheogens, and eventually living with this cognitive dissonance of having one foot in the world that my family required me to have my foot in the sort of consensus reality world, and one foot in the truther world, if you want to call it that, truther world, or the world of truth, and really not being able to reconcile the two. And then eventually 18 months apart, to prolonged psychotic episodes, or I'll call them spiritual emergencies. The medical establishment will call them psychotic episodes. And then I already had an understanding through my craniosacral therapy of trauma and what trauma is, and how trauma affects our lives. And I was deepening that understanding, and really understanding addiction as a coping mechanism, and then deepening that understanding really into, it's not just a coping mechanism, it's a survival mechanism. And through the understanding of the physiology of the body, and what happens when we're traumatized, and what trauma actually is, so deepening my work in going into the 12-step program, because that was kind of the only help that my family would give me after those spiritual emergencies. So I had to sort of submit myself to the 12-step program for a period of time, which was quite difficult, to having that understanding of trauma, and then this sort of moralistic view of what addiction is, and this sort of disease model, the medicalization of addiction, and trying to reconcile those was quite a difficult period. And I really did just let go of all my old understanding. So like I've told you before, I've done this backwards and forwards, forgetting and remembering, and forgetting and remembering over the years of what trauma actually is, and through the spiritual emergences as well, and understanding that actually my childhood was pretty traumatic for me, and that most people's childhoods are pretty traumatic for them, because we come in this beautiful expression of unconditional love, and then we get shut down by all the control mechanisms, and that understanding has deepened further and further. And then I did recently, in the last 3 years, I think I started at the end of 2020, a qualification in recovery coaching. So now I hold space as a trauma-informed recovery coach, working with childhood trauma, basically, because my view, or the trauma-informed view, is that addiction is like a really, really late symptom of childhood trauma. And there are a lot of sort of milestones before one gets to that in the trauma journey. And underlying it all is our abandonment issues and our relationships with our parents. And so that's what I work with. So I go right to the cause, rather than, trying to put band-aids on the symptoms, which I feel is a lot what happens in the sort of mainstream world. And that goes back again to my craniosacral training, and my work with homeopathy, because I also would prefer to go to a homeopath rather than a GP, and permanently looking for what is the underlying cause. And then of course also I think it's Carolyn Mace, you know, heal your body, with the psychological things behind why we manifest physically in the way we do. So yeah, lots of stuff. And then here I found myself after that recovery coaching journey, and also going into the organic humanity movement, because at the end of the day, if nobody will stand up, you know, if I won't stand up, who will? So putting myself forward, which is something I really never wanted to do, you know, but yeah, put myself forward. And I think you didn't either. Neither. We were waiting for other people to step up. And then we both of us ended up standing. And then of course in between all of this is also my journey with sovereignty. And so 10 years ago I joined the Republic of Good Hope, and sort of started looking into birth certificate, for what they call birth certificate fraud, and what all of that stuff is, and what sovereignty happens to be. You know, what is sovereignty? Who does have authority over me? Where am I responsible for myself, and where am I not? And through all of that process, trying to remove myself from the system as far as I can, and being able to do it sometimes and not in other areas. And why can't I do it? And here are my abandonment issues, and I've got to deal with those, and deal with all the reasons why I want somebody else to take responsibility for my life instead of me. Yeah. And how all of those things add up into this journey of stepping out of the system and finding myself in the place that I do, that I feel that to a large degree, and of course it's an ongoing journey on a day-to-day basis of checking why I'm taking offense at things that other people say or do, and where my responsibility lies in that interaction, and how I can come to peace with all of those things, you know, and while remembering that everybody else is also a traumatized child who needs to grow up. Yeah. That's kind of it in a quick nutshell. I don't know if you want to dig in anyway there.
Yes, I'll go in a bit, so it gives me a good background there. So let's go on our common ground a tad. The organic humanity movement. Are you still with the organic humanity movement, standing as a candidate? How do you go with that, and where are you now with that?
Yeah, so I mean, up until that point, I had been a member of the Republic of Good Hope. I had been investigating this understanding of law versus legal, that the legal society is actually not law, and how they use obfuscation and language, etc., to confuse everybody to think that the legal society actually has any authority over a person, and actually eventually coming to the understanding that they only have authority over me if I think they do, if I let them, you know. So all of that stuff was, and then of course COVID, you know.
Yes, I was just going to say, yeah, exactly, right in the midst of that.
Right in the midst of all of my work, COVID, and like knowing when I was listening to Ramaphosa announcing what was about to happen in South Africa, and listening to the languaging about a common enemy, and we will be united against a common enemy, that I was listening to scripted messaging, and that this was Hegelian dialectic, and that this was problem, you know, problem, whatever, reaction, solution. And like thinking to myself, oh my God, here it is, I thought we had still had lots of time before they actually pulled this move. And now what, and finding that my family were not interested in listening to my opinions of what was going on behind the scenes. And then, of course, Des came on the scene, with his Double O Des channel and all of that. And through that, I found Lauren and the organic humanity movement. And like, I've always had this really strong, and possibly because of my childhood experience of injustice, of being the scapegoat of the family and people not listening to me or whatever, and having this sort of facade face the world, and me knowing what was going on behind the scenes, but you're not allowed to talk about it publicly, I've always had this very strong thing about truth and justice, Also, I'm a Libran, so there's the Venusian thing around truth and justice as well. And yeah, when I listened to Lauren, and when she put out, I went to the meeting and I listened to what she was putting forward as a solution, and I thought to myself, yeah, this could work, if we could, like, it was the fact that the organic humanity movement was based on principles that could unite people across everything made me feel that it was something that could work, because we're never all going to get on the same page, and no, for heaven forbid we do. It would be such a boring world. So I was really taken with the fact that it was based on the principles of love and truth and all of these things, all of these things that I've been trying to manifest in my life and learning about and all of that stuff. So I joined, and that's when I met you, when we had that first meeting at Animalia. And yeah, it seemed like it was a plan that could work. And when nobody stood up, and eventually, I've been, since the human touch, since I was 27, if you want people to follow, you have to go first. So I said, okay, I'll be a candidate. And that's how I became a candidate for the organic humanity movement. Yeah.
Stunning. Yeah. And freedom. Hey, big thing about that was freedom. Yeah. So are you still with them? Are you still doing that?
No, I'm not. And, that's been a journey in itself. I was living in Kloof when we started that, and then of course we had the riots, and my kids were up here in Hillcrest, Assegai area, and so I decided to move here. Yeah, and I had that dream when we first arrived about all the Hardidars gathering when I first arrived in Assegai. I went outside onto my veranda, and all these Hardidars were gathered in the trees, and hundreds of thousands of them, and then they all started falling out of the trees dead, and while all of that was happening, all these birds falling out of the trees dead, I was dancing with the children. And yeah, so that was quite a big dream for me. It was like, okay, so you're gathering here because you're scared of being alone or whatever, and down in Kloof without the whole family, without the whole community, and here you are coming for community. Like, but Hardidars gather when they're frightened, and they shout when they're frightened. And all of these Hardidars falling out of the tree was quite like a wake-up call for me. And that's what I found, was that regardless of Lauren and Des's intentions or whatever, the group to me was fear-based, and I was battling to work with that. So I kind of stepped out. I still I still think that the model is good, but I'm not sure that it will have the effect that are you got a chicken coming in your house? I'm not sure that it'll have the effect that it does, because everybody's gathering out of fear, you know, and I don't like the us and them kind of feeling. And also through the sovereignty stuff, you know, the governments are not legitimate, and now I've taken that step into actually through my through my course that I did last year, The Sovereign's Way and the Law for Mankind, that actually none of it can have any bearing on me unless I allow it to. So I am a sovereign being. I will go and do my own way, and I don't need an election to legitimize my way of being. I think that's basically why I'm not involved anymore.
And to come in there and to reiterate what he's saying, you know, a lot of why we are friends like we are is that we do walk our talk. So to illustrate, I mean, you as a candidate, I was also a candidate. I remember so distinctly how beautifully you did it. You literally, everybody was masking. Okay. We didn't. In the electioneering and before that and the day as well. And you went into the election hall where you were a candidate in one of the many, and without a mask, and you voted and you walked out. And that is your sovereign stamp. That is you. You were there. You no holds barred. You weren't pretending anything. You weren't towing a line to be nice or whatever. And you did not comply. And I will never forget that, you know. And that's been an inspiration for both of us, each other, I think, because that's what we did. And there were very few, if any, other people that did that, you know. And it's not to make us look cool, but that is just like, fuck this, you know. Let's just do what we say we do.
Absolutely, Nico. And you know that has been a long, hard one, understanding about all of this stuff. That as long as I know in myself that I am sovereign and nobody has any right to tell me what to do with my body, actually. You know, I mean, I even did, you know, I used to shop without a mask on as far as possible. You know, and I'd have security guards following me around the shop saying, you know, put your mask on, and I just like thumbs up them and keep going, you know. But I remember when I moved here as well, when it was the consensus and everybody was trying to figure out, you know, what we have to do and what we don't have to do. And the people arrived at my gate and they said, you know, can we come in with the census? And I said, no, I won't be doing the census. And they said, oh, well, can we record your, you know, we need to record your refusal. And they asked for my information. And I said, that's private information and I won't give it out. And they went away and they never came back. And it, you know, other people had been threatened with 20,000 Rand fine for not complying, etc., etc. But I was clear, I'm not going to take part in this thing that I don't, you know, I don't want to bring my reasonable agreement to any of this stuff, and I'm not going to do it. And I was clear in myself, and so they went away and they never came back, you know. Yeah.
Exactly. And that's we will discuss sovereignty in more detail and flesh that out in further podcasts. And as we go along, it will always come up, because most of us don't even know what that word means, you know, hardly even able to spell it, let alone, I mean, the English language being as it is. So, and also just in short, and what you demonstrated there is that when you know in full in your being that you are sovereign, then it will work. It's like approaching a dog. You can have the mechanics of saying no and telling them the reasons, and they're all legit according to natural law, the law of mankind. God's law, that if you don't really own it in your inner being before you even say it and show it, it will not work. You approach a dog, you're pretending to be not scared, but you're actually scared. The dog's going to hup you,
Yeah.
you know. And unfortunately, these people are all puppets and call them dogs, you know, that just obey the commands of their masters. And hence, we actually almost treat energetically that behavior. They're also sovereign people. They just don't, they've forgotten. But treat that behavior as if that as for what it is, a dog, you know, and stand in your power, and it will just walk away, you know, or lick your hand and off or whatever it is. So yeah, no, good one, absolutely. Beautiful. So Pete, why are you here on this podcast?
So very quickly, because we've only got 10 minutes left.
Cool.
Radical self-responsibility. Yeah, that's something that you and I started talking about when we were doing the organic humanity movement stuff. And really that's the journey that I've been on, you know, is taking responsibility for myself, physically, emotionally, financially, spiritually, and it's been a long journey, and there've been backwards and forwards, etc., but that's really the journey I've been on. And part of that is the inner child work I've done, and the abandonment, you know, dealing with my abandonment issues, healing the relationship with my mother within myself by becoming my own inner mother, my own inner parent, you know. And so that is really the work that I like to do with people, is to help them deal with the reasons that they aren't able to step into radical self-responsibility, you know, to go to that cause and to heal that stuff. And I've got various modalities that I've been studying, that I've used myself, that you know, that I use to get into that inner conversation in my head and within myself, and become my own inner parent. And so that really is the thing. You know, we've been watching all those Mark Passio videos and stuff, which is, you know, the Hermetic philosophy and all those Hermetic principles that have underpinned really all the stuff that I've done over the years, this understanding of natural law that has just got clearer and clearer and clearer for me. And that's brought it all together. This understanding of how the brain works, which is something I understood from trauma, but now sort of tying that up with what the sacred feminine and sacred masculine are, and how the balance of the lack of balance of those things in any of us means that we're not centered and we can't be sovereign. And so what is that, and how does that play out in my life, is something that I've been investigating really deeply for the last 5 years. And so yeah, that is where I want to work with people, and how I want to approach radical self-responsibility. You know, there are people like Mark Passio out there who can really explain it, but my passion and the place that I really seem to be able to make the most difference is helping people to drop the guilt and shame that was projected onto them by their own traumatized parents, and to step into full radical self-responsibility themselves. So that's what I'm doing here.
Yeah. And those parents and traumatized parents are, as we see, mirrored everywhere in every institution and things that call themselves authorities, because that's what parents do. And first of all, there's no handbook for parenting. I mean, nobody teaches parenting at school, and suddenly you become a parent and you're squashed. And yeah, so it obviously, when you work with that inner and personal experience, it reflects outwards and encompasses all of your relationships going further with all those
That's it.
institutions.
And Martha Beck, who she's a psychologist, and she like works with inner child work, she says, do the inner child work on the inner child stuff, which is your relationship with yourself, and everything else clears up quickly. I'm paraphrasing, but that's basically what she
Mm,
says, you know.
no, absolutely perfect. Yes,
Yeah.
yes. No, and the paraphrasing is perfect because it's exactly what we're doing here. You know, these are personal experiences of bigger things, other people's things, our own things. And so when we own it and make it our own, I think then we start to live it and we are able to, as we teach it, especially really learn it, you know.
Mm.
That is the journey that we're on. Not just hold it to ourselves either, because then it goes nowhere and it's a little stagnant, occultic knowledge that also can go very dark, as we
Yeah,
also have seen. Yeah,
absolutely.
lovely. Yeah, we've got
Brilliant.
about 3 minutes left. Anything else, just as a roundup, perhaps, of what you were saying?
Um, no, not
You also
really. I
play
think
music. You play music fantastically, beautifully on a piano that is tuned to.
432,
Yes.
432,
I've got a
and
lot
that
of chickens, which basically also shouted when you were mentioning the Hardidas, by the way. Yes, carry on.
interesting. Yeah. Yeah, so I've had my piano tuned to 432. Some people say it's not possible, but I've my piano tuner was able to do it. And so I bathe myself in healing vibrations every time I sit in front of my piano, which I love. And yeah, that's also a nod to my inner child. You know, my music was my haven, my escape. The music room was at the other end of the house, and it was where I went to be by myself and to be quiet and away from everything. So yeah, and I caught up to where I was at the end of matric, and I'm still learning new pieces, and yeah, and I love to play, and sometimes I jam with friends, and you would be one of those. So.
Lovely. Yeah, and from classical mostly,
Yeah,
trained and
so
training, and
classical
then
training,
yeah,
ABRSM, but now trying to get myself sort of into more contemporary music, also through Gary's influence, because of course he's a jazz guitarist and stuff. So
yeah,
trying to get myself into being able to do improv and all of that stuff, you know.
that's
And
it. Yeah.
so I've also, although I have my music lessons with my classical teacher, I've also had I've had lessons with different jazz teachers as well. And on it goes, which is a beautiful journey all in itself. And there's no like destination, you know.
Mm. Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. Awesomeness.
You're
Lekker.
welcome.
Okay, cool. We're gonna call it at that, and then we're
Yeah.
gonna swap places. Beautiful. Thank you. What a stunning intro. And I really hope that this inspires people. It certainly does me. I have goosebumps many a moment, and I run my life on goosebumps, and I know I'm in the right place. Stoked as it is, and they say in Durbs, riding waves and getting, yeah. So I hope it inspires people, because going forward, we are going to ask people and those who would like to, come and face the music and
Sure.
stand in their power and share themselves and their lives in respect and relation to a radical self-reliance and what they're doing and actioning in their lives
Absolutely.
and for themselves and each other here in our amazing, beautiful community. So
Brilliant.
thanks for that. Thank you.
Okay. Cheerio.